My friends, the New England Patriots are heading into training camp with several major questions surrounding this roster, but one of the most interesting storylines may be developing at wide receiver. And when you look closely at the players fighting for opportunities, there is one name that could become much more important than many fans expected: Kyle Williams. Last season, Williams showed flashes of the talent that made the Patriots select him in the 3rd round, but he never consistently reached the level many expected from him. The speed was there, the ability to catch the football was there, the route running ability was there, but something was missing. At times it felt like he was still trying to find his place in the offense and develop the necessary chemistry with Drake May. Now, heading into his 2nd season, the situation is completely different. Kyle Williams has already experienced the NFL. He has already been through a full season. He knows what the speed of the game feels like. He knows what is expected of him, and he has had more time to build a connection with Drake May. That experience could be extremely important, and there is a strong belief that Williams could be one of the Patriots players most likely to make a significant jump this season. But the wide receiver room is not going to make that easy. New England has added more competition and more talent to the position, which means every single player is going to have to fight for targets and snaps. A.J. Brown is obviously going to be a major part of the offense. Romeo Doubs is also expected to play an important role. Pop Douglas remains a dangerous option from the slot. Matt Collins is part of the group as well. And then you have players like Kayshon Boutte and Kyle Williams competing for their own opportunities. That brings us to one of the most interesting situations in this entire roster: Kayshon Boutte. Boutte is entering a contract year, and last season was the best season of his career. He finished with 33 receptions, 551 receiving yards, 6 touchdowns, nearly 17 yards per catch, and only 1 drop. Those numbers are important because they show that Boutte has real ability. He was also one of Drake May's top targets last season. The problem is that the Patriots now have a much deeper wide receiver room. Boutte is still on the roster. He is still going to compete. He can still win a job, but the path to consistent targets has become much more difficult. He is not going to simply walk into a major role ahead of A.J. Brown. Pop Douglas has a strong position as a slot receiver, and Romeo Doubs is also expected to receive opportunities. That leaves Boutte in a very competitive situation, and because he is entering the final year of his contract, he needs to play the best football of his career if he wants to earn a significant payday. The question is whether that football will happen in New England. A trade during training camp now appears increasingly difficult. If another team truly wanted Boutte and was willing to offer the price the Patriots wanted, there is a possibility that a deal would have already happened, perhaps during the draft or around the time of the A.J. Brown trade. But as the season gets closer, it becomes harder to imagine a team making a major move for him without first seeing what happens during training camp. That does not mean a trade is impossible. In fact, the trade deadline could become the most realistic moment for a deal. Injuries happen every season. A team could suddenly lose a wide receiver and find itself desperate for help. If Kayshon Boutte is playing well, the Patriots could potentially have a valuable piece to offer. A team that believes it is a contender might be willing to make a move for a receiver who can immediately step into its offense. But before any of that happens, Boutte has to prove that he deserves a major role in New England, and that is where this competition becomes so fascinating. If Boutte beats out Kyle Williams for more playing time, he could earn a larger role. But if Kyle Williams finally takes that step forward in his 2nd season, the situation could look very different. The Patriots may have to decide whether they want to continue developing a young player with upside or keep a receiver who already showed production but is entering a contract year. There is also a battle developing at the slot receiver position, and this could be one of the biggest surprises of training camp. Efton Chisholm is a name Patriots fans should be watching very closely. Last season, Chisholm had 3 receptions for 75 yards and 1 touchdown, including a huge play against the Chargers. Those numbers may not jump off the page, but the potential is there. He could be quietly becoming one of the most interesting young players in this wide receiver group. The battle between Chisholm and Pop Douglas could be especially important. Pop is entering the final year of his contract, and there is a belief that the Patriots may not extend him. If that happens, New England could be looking at Chisholm as a possible future option at the position. That does not necessarily mean Chisholm will take all of Pop Douglas's snaps. In fact, both players could receive plenty of opportunities, but Chisholm has another advantage that could help him make the roster: special teams. Mike Vrabel has always valued players who can contribute in multiple ways, and Chisholm could potentially give the Patriots exactly exactly that. New England does not have a completely settled kick returner right now. Tyquan Jennings had an opportunity before suffering a concussion. Trey Nixon and Henderson were also involved at different points, while Kyle Williams could potentially be considered for the role. There is also TreVeyon Henderson, who showed how electric he can be returning kicks. But after Antonio Gibson suffered an ACL injury on a kick return last season, the idea of putting Henderson in that position carries a lot more risk. That could open the door for Efton Chisholm. Last season, Chisholm played in 8 games and had 16 kick returns, averaging 24 yards per return. He may not be the fastest player on the roster, but his quickness, agility, and ability to make sharp cuts could make him a very useful option. If he can continue improving, he could become the player who gives the Patriots stability on special teams, while also competing for offensive snaps. And that could be the difference between making the roster and being left off it. Right now, Chisholm feels like one of the biggest potential surprises of training camp. He has an opportunity to show that he is more than just a depth receiver. He could become a legitimate part of the Patriots' future at wide receiver and potentially one of the team's most important special teams players. But while the young receivers are fighting for their futures, there is also a major question surrounding one of the veterans in the secondary, Carlton Davis. The truth is, with Davis, you already have a pretty good idea of what you are going to get. Sometimes he can look like one of the best cornerbacks on the field. Other times, he can have difficult moments that leave fans frustrated. He is a player who can be extremely good and extremely inconsistent from game to game. But even with those concerns, there is still confidence in the Patriots secondary. The belief is that New England has one of the strongest cornerback groups in the league, and Carlton Davis remains an important part of that group. The question is not necessarily whether he can suddenly become a completely different player. The question is whether the Patriots can consistently get the best version of Carlton Davis, and if they can, this secondary could be one of the biggest strengths on the entire roster. On offense, the biggest question may eventually become money. Drake May is entering a stage of his career where, if he continues to develop and becomes the quarterback the Patriots believe he can be, a massive contract will eventually be waiting for him. The hope from a Patriots perspective is that May could choose to leave some money on the table in order to help New England keep more talent around him. But the reality is that quarterbacks of his caliber rarely take significant pay cuts. Joe Burrow did not do it. Patrick Mahomes did not truly do it. Josh Allen did not do it. In today's NFL, quarterbacks have enormous leverage, and if Drake May becomes the player many people expect him to become, he could eventually become the highest paid quarterback in NFL history. That is why this Patriots roster could become so important. If New England can build a championship caliber team around May before that massive contract arrives, the organization could have a critical window to compete. And if May were willing to make the kind of financial sacrifice that could help the Patriots keep more talent around him, the team could potentially remain loaded for much longer. That is the dream, but for now, the Patriots have to focus on what is happening right in front of them. Training camp, competition, and players trying to prove that they belong. Kyle Williams has the opportunity to take a major step forward. Kayshon Boutte is fighting for his future and could become a potential trade candidate later in the season. Efton Chisholm could emerge as one of the biggest surprises on the roster. The wide receiver room is deeper than it was before, and that means not everyone is going to get the role they want, and that may be exactly what the Patriots need. Competition creates pressure. Pressure reveals which players are ready. So now I want to know what Patriots fans think. Do you believe Kayshon Boutte should remain in New England and fight for a role, or would you rather see the Patriots trade him while he still has value? And which player do you believe will make the biggest jump during training camp? Kyle Williams or Efton Chisholm? But the training camp questions do not stop with the wide receiver room. There are several other decisions that could have a major impact on the Patriots season, and one of the biggest questions is how this team will perform against the most difficult opponents on its schedule. There is one game that stands out above the rest. Week 7 on the road against the Chicago Bears on Thursday Night Football. This is the type of game that can become a serious test for any team. The Patriots would be playing on a short week, which means less time to prepare. They would be traveling on the road, playing in a nationally televised game, and facing a team led by Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams. That combination makes the matchup extremely difficult. The Patriots will have less time to prepare their game plan, less time to recover physically, and less room for mistakes. And when you are facing an offensive mind like Ben Johnson, that lack of preparation time can become even more dangerous. Caleb Williams is another major factor. A quarterback with the ability to extend plays and create something outside of the structure of the offense can make a defense uncomfortable. The Patriots will need to be disciplined, especially on a short week, because one mistake can completely change the game. There are other difficult games on the schedule, of course. The Packers matchup could be a challenge. The Monday night game against the Chiefs will also demand a lot from New England. But the combination of the road environment, the short week, the national spotlight, Ben Johnson, and Caleb Williams makes Chicago feel like the toughest game of the regular season. And that is exactly the kind of game that could tell us how good this Patriots team really is. If New England is able to win that matchup, it could become one of the most impressive victories of the season. But if the Patriots struggle, it would not necessarily mean the season is over. The circumstances surrounding the game are simply difficult for any team. The good news for Patriots fans is that the team also appears to have games on the schedule where confidence is extremely high. The Denver Broncos matchup is viewed very